what's going on with them. They have these stories and separation of children, and here are our children.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody. Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
There's a story that fell through the cracks at the beginning of July that I missed. It's this one. Back on July 6th, the AP, with this headline that the governor of Arkansas says Arkansas working to exempt China planning paper mill, the China firm planning the paper mill from the tariffs. This was a story. Arkansas Governor Hutchinson says newly imposed tariffs by the Trump administration shouldn't affect plans for a new Chinese-owned paper mill in the state. That is not the story today, though. We'll get to that here in a minute. The Republicans said in early July the state is working with the federal officials to exempt Sun Paper from tariffs for the planned Arkadelphia facility. It comes amid escalating trade dispute between China and the U.S. Preston also said a handful of additional Chinese companies have halted possible plans to build in Arkansas because of tariff concerns. We will give you more on this in just a moment. Funding your enemy, making your enemy rich. We'll talk more about that. Don't go anywhere.
Not permanently separated from our loved ones. And yet, remember that if an American breaks the law, they get charged and convicted, they go to jail. And whether they have a child at home or not, so it's okay to separate Americans from their families, but it's not okay to separate illegal aliens who, number one, put themselves in that situation knowingly, and then, of course, the outcry is for them. It's completely backwards right now.
Yeah, it really seems you can see their long game kind of coming to fruition here when it comes to how they've changed the definitions of words. You know, it used to be illegal alien, then it was illegal immigrant, now it's undocumented immigrant. And so this concept, Maria, that what they've done here is like, you know, they're basically saying that it's not a crime. So, you know, it's obvious that if I'm driving with my daughter and I do something in the car that's illegal and I need to be taken to jail, it's obvious my daughter's not going to come with me to jail. They're going to separate us, right? Because it's a crime.
Absolutely.
So they've kind of they're trying to win this battle of words, redefining what things mean. And so what they're saying is, you know what? It's not a crime to come here illegally.
Absolutely. And what that's doing is, of course, with the open borders, erasing our borders. We are not a country without our borders, and shredding our Constitution. But all these playing around with laws, and California has done this as well, of course, and Massachusetts, Maryland, and where they are fundamentally undermining the basis for any laws to be obeyed. And that's a very dangerous slope right now. So, you know, we can pick and choose which laws we want to enforce upon the illegal alien. And now we're letting them get away with it. And then now you see what Governor Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, did, giving himself issuing an executive order, giving himself authority to be able to pardon these ex-cons so now that they can vote. So he's allowed 35,000 felons to vote now. So, you know, Paul, what are we becoming? We're becoming a lawless nation with chaos and mayhem. And the rest of us are standing around going, what has happened to my America? But if we don't, you know, get active, and I encourage every one of your listeners, you know, we've seen what two people, and my husband and myself, have done, and totally just, I can't tell you, we were just moved, Paul, to do this and to keep on. And I'm 100% volunteer. I put my small company on hold. My husband was a professional engineer, certainly not independently wealthy. He made a good living, but
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Speaking of stories that fell through the cracks, Joe, you don't have this one, but back on August the 3rd, Breitbart News reports that a Chinese dissident, a professor, disappears during a Voice of America radio interview because the government got to him. Voice of America was in the middle of a telephone interview with dissident professor Wei Gong-sun on Wednesday night when Chinese police burst into his house, dragged him away. His last words were, "I'm entitled to express my opinion. This is my freedom of speech." Sadly, these assertions by the professor proved to be inaccurate as the tyrants of Beijing made him disappear. Efforts by Voice of America's Issues and Opinions television show to get back in touch with its kidnapped guest have been futile, according to Voice of America. Hey, but you know what? You need to invest all you want in Arkansas. Do we have similar values with is that? I mean, are we for sale? You know, as long as it's the right amount of money, the right dollar figure, we're good with it. We'll ignore it. Here's a flashback article, Talk Business and Politics, about the tariffs back on March the 8th. Okay, this is before the Donald Trump administration had some successes with these tariffs, you know. The initial tariffs that the president put on caused China to drop some of their tariffs on their American auto imports. Then you had the European Union tariffs. Within the European Union, the European Union comes over and they make a deal, okay? Here's the thing. I was talking to a friend about this the other day. Everybody in the world wants access to our market here in the United States. And so this is an attempt, and I don't know if it's going to be successful. And I know in conservative circles it's extremely taboo to even, toy with the idea of tariffs. But if you by the way, there's also this concept where I was here in this article, listen to this flashback article, Talk Business and Politics, Michael Tilley, Trump's tariffs opposed by the governor and a majority of Arkansas's congressional delegation. And the governor back in March was quoted as saying that Trump had walked away from the negotiating table. I found that interesting. Governor Hutchinson told Talk Business and Politics, President Trump has always advocated for tougher U.S. negotiations on trade deals, and I too support a harder line on these negotiations, but I'm troubled that today's announcement of tariffs on steel and aluminum takes negotiations off the table and leaves the United States vulnerable to retaliatory actions. Listen, here's the thing. I don't know. I mean, acting like tariffs is not a negotiating table. Donald Trump is still at the negotiating table, right? I mean, you're still negotiating because even if you are in a trade war and everybody keeps retaliating, that's still, you don't get to define negotiation. You're still in negotiations. You're using the tariffs and you're telling them, look, we are going to do this. And then when you come back and eventually agree to remove the tariffs, the United States, again, everybody wants access to our market, is now negotiating from a position of strength. And that's what this whole thing is. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating to watch. You have people, it's almost like they want the president to fail at this. It's almost like they love the status quo so much that they want the president to fail. People in his own party, that's what it seems like to me. This is again, why would any governor of any state be courting Chinese business the way we are? The way we have. I mean, these deals were inked up until the tariffs. And that brings us to the Andrew DeMello piece that came out yesterday. And this, by the way, made it to the Drudge Report. There are people who are trying to fight this concept of tariffs. It makes them very uncomfortable. And the only reason it makes most people uncomfortable because it's a significant amount of change, and it might actually make them have to look at their business a little closer and make some adjustments here and there. And a lot of people don't like to do that. It makes them nervous. And I'm talking about big, big, big business. Headline, concern in Arkansas town highlights trade fears in U.S. states. I mean, and the U.S. media is going to be all over this, particularly because this is in Arkadelphia, Arkansas. And with Arkadelphia, Arkansas, they can be like, this is a Trump state, and Trump's policies are hurting Trump voters. They voted to hurt themselves. And that's what the media wants you to think. That's why they're talking about soybeans. They're obsessed about soybeans. I remember Lou Dobbs, though, he said, we're talking about $40 billion a year industry, $20 billion of it gets exported. And yet China is stealing $600 billion a year in our intellectual property. And that's what he's trying to address. And when Donald Trump is, from my standpoint, when he's attempting to address this, he's looking at the totality of his cards. He's looking at all of the cards he can play. But listen to Andrew DeMello writes that a Chinese company's announcement 2 years ago that it would spend more than $1 billion and hire hundreds of workers for a paper mill on the outskirts of this rural college town was seen as a much-needed shot in the arm for the region's economy. A web video promoting Arkadelphia, it's a great place to call home, continues to tout the Sun Paper Company, the project, and its potential to generate jobs and boost development. Folks, in the Arkansas Economic Development magazine, there is an ad that says China is coming to Arkansas. And it's got a picture of a Chinese building in the architectural style. And it's like, wow, is the factory gonna look like a giant? No, of course not. But you get the point. It's a very strange ad. Andrew DeMello goes on, though, but optimism has been giving way to concern in recent months amid President Trump's escalating trade dispute with China. The threat of a full-blown trade war has delayed the project further and prompted the state's governor to send his top economic development official to China to make sure it stays on track. It has also caused other Chinese companies considering investing in Arkansas to put their plans on hold. Stephen Bell, the president and chief executive officer of the Arkadelphia Area Chamber of Commerce, says this, quote, "It's like a dark cloud hanging over the future of the project. Right now, the clouds are off on the horizon, but I think no one knows where the trade situation is going right now." Well, look, if Donald Trump's tariffs make Chinese companies not want to come here, I just would assume that your Chinese economic development plan isn't consistent with the Make America Great Again agenda. I would assume that that's the case. I mean, what are we going to call this Chinese economic development plan? China Works. That sounds good, right, Joe? Yeah. I think the governor should call a press conference, use his bully pulpit, and say, "I've got a new idea, new plan, brand new plan, and we're going to call it China Works, and we're gonna double down. We're going to bring even more. We'll have intellectual property theft, espionage checkpoints, to make sure." But we're going to continue the program. I mean, this is ridiculous. I still want the question answered, though. I would like to know why China. If we were doing this with Russia, now think about this for a second, okay? Everybody's Russia. The president's a Russian agent is what they want you to tell you. Now, there's actual proof that Dianne Feinstein is a Chinese agent. There's actual proof that she had somebody working in her office and she had this cushy business relationship her husband did. I mean, we actually have proof of all that based on financial records and relationships and things. But Russia's economy is so much smaller than China's. But can you imagine if we were doing this with Russian companies? Oh, the media would. I can't believe you're a traitor. But for some reason, the communist Chinese is perfectly fine. You want to know why the communist Chinese fit in so well trying to invest in America? It's because we believe in this economic incentive policy where the state gives taxpayer money and picks winners and losers. That's exactly the system that they operate over there 24 hours a day in communist China, so it makes sense to them. It makes sense to some of these states because they haven't, for some reason, they don't understand. Some of these governors, all 50 states do this, where they give taxpayer money and pick winners and losers to corporations just outright with incentives and tax breaks. And they don't see that as socialism. They don't see that as microwave communism. Well, China does. They know exactly what it is. That's how they operate over there. They operate completely in the context of the government creates jobs. And we try to tiptoe around it. We'll run campaigns that sound conservative, but we can't wait to take that taxpayer checkbook. We can't wait to give it to the Chinese. And the Chinese say, well, of course, this is how things are. It's just, in a way, it is anti-American. You can't really, not just with the Chinese, but the whole concept of capitalism, the whole concept of a free market, when you start to give this money away, trying to entice, and I know all 50 states do it, but you are essentially thumbing your nose at people who pull themselves up by their own bootstraps and make huge companies or small companies or provide for their families. And you're giving a government advantage to these companies. Oh, because it's going to benefit other people, because it's going to create jobs. No, that's not what it does. We've highlighted multiple times that these economic schemes are exactly that. They give good press to the people, the politicians that announce and cut these deals, but they take skilled labor that's already employed from an existing Arkansas taxpayer, an Arkansas business owner, and you allow the Chinese company to hire them away at a higher wage, and then you claim a job's created when in reality you've just shuffled one employee from one place to another place? How many of the Sun Paper employees are on the couch right now? If this factory goes through, how many of the Sun Paper's future employees in Arkadelphia are on the couch right now and will be at work? And the answer is very, very few. Now, that would actually be a legitimate creation of a job. So I'm getting worked up about this, but still don't have my question answered, which is why China, considering the fact that President Trump made the excellent point, which was, why would Germany be cutting a deal with Russia and their gas pipeline deal and then expect NATO to protect them from Russia when they're making Russia rich? We are in a trade war with China. We are in a unspoken, we're in a cold war with China in a way that no one talks about. And yet we want the Chinese company to come here, use our timber, use our natural resources to make a Chinese communist country rich. The question is, why China? Because China works? Look for the mainstream media, folks, to continue to hype what Trump's tariffs are doing to places like Arkadelphia. The media will not be able to contain themselves. They'll be so happy that they can report something negative on this. I wonder what the people think about it. Andrew DeMello goes on, the uncertainty in Arkansas, where voters overwhelmingly supported Trump in 2016, highlights how U.S. states are trying to ease the sting of the president's threatened trade war by appealing directly to Chinese companies. Those companies invested $29 billion in the U.S. last year, virtually all of which was related to corporate mergers and acquisitions, according to the research firm Rhodium Group. While that was down from a record $46 billion in 2016, those investments remain crucial for local economies. Political leaders from both parties have objected. Governors from Nevada, Colorado, Massachusetts, North Carolina, for example, protested tariffs on imported solar energy components, saying it would cost tens of thousands of U.S. jobs. Trump went forward with those tariffs anyway. In Arkansas alone, retaliatory tariffs from China, the European Union, Mexico, and Canada threatened $339 million in exports, according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Look for the mainstream media to keep pumping this stuff out as fast as they can. State and local officials have been trying to reassure Sun Paper, with Governor Hutchinson sending his top economic development advisor to China. Would that be Mike Preston? Is that your top economic development? You know, the guy that looked out the room in the governor's press room and said to the Chinese delegation that they have representatives and senators now. Arkansas state representatives, Arkansas state senators are now your representatives, Chinese officials, and when you call, they're going to answer. The Trump administration has assured him it will work with them on tariff exemptions for the facility. Hutchinson sending his top economic development advisor to China. The governor, listen to this, the governor, a Republican, says the Trump administration has assured him it will work with them on tariff exemptions for the facility. State and local officials say they remain optimistic about the paper mill, but the governor says the trade fight isn't good for luring new industry. It's obvious that with uncertainty, businesses hesitate to invest in new projects. That's whether you're a United States businessman or whether you're a China investor. I just wonder, if you're going to give the money to somebody, if you're going to do this and participate in a failed economic development strategy that picks winners and losers, why not do it with a United States company? Why China? Now, he says, Hutchinson is saying, Asa is saying here, that Trump is saying he is assured, or the Trump administration, not Trump, but the Trump administration, has assured him that it will work with Arkansas to get the tariffs removed for this particular Chinese company. That's very interesting. I wonder if that'll happen. Do you have the Mike Preston audio queued up? I'm sorry. I thought that's what you were doing, Joe. I know you were doing something else. No. It's fine. It's fine. So, anyway, feel free. I want to know what you think about this. I had somebody message me on Facebook just now. Hang on 1 second. Where did that go? Trump's message was Trump's message has consistently been America first, while the governor was recorded saying Trump's agenda is not my agenda. $25 million in incentives from the state of Arkansas. That's certainly interesting. We've got feelers and we got researchers out doing a lot of asking around about what the deal with this is. Hopefully we're going to have some sort of news on that soon. But anyway. Do you have the audio? I want to go back and listen to this real quick before we go to break. Mike Preston, the head of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. This is not Sun Paper with Arkadelphia. This is Rui, a different Chinese company. Now, again, I think they're trying to get the Sun deal to go through, but according to reports, the other Chinese deals are on hold because of the tariffs. But this is what Mike Preston said to a bunch of, I guess, people from the Rui company about how they now have representation in the Arkansas General Assembly now.
Chairman Chu, Rui, welcome to Arkansas. And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them, and they're going to help you. Guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
I have a text message here. This is fascinating. These people are incompetent, only pursue things that benefit them. Truly, the legislature is China's representatives. Where are the anti-corporate liberals? Now, that's a great question. Where are the anti-corporate liberals? Do you remember when liberals and progressives were against corporate welfare when it came to oil companies? Remember? But that was back during the Iraq War, right? That was back when it's like, we're going to war for oil. And the oil companies are evil. The oil companies, they get all this corporate welfare. Yeah, you know what? They did get corporate welfare. They do get, and yeah, I'm against it. But are we not also against giving big Chinese corporations our money too? But no, where are they? Where are the Democrats that should be opposed to corporate welfare? We're going to take a break. Back in a minute. If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government, and the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive.
Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Now here we are, using our retirement to try to save this country. I cannot have a small business like my parents had if I don't have a country, Paul, and that's what it's coming down to.
Wow. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think a lot of people feel that way, and I appreciate you sacrificing to promote this cause. We're talking with Maria Espinoza. She's the director of the Remembrance Project. You can find out more at theremembranceproject.org. You used the phrase, Maria, earlier, preventable deaths. That's the whole point here. These deaths are preventable if we had an immigration policy that made sense. President Trump tweeted recently, it's in the news, all of the morning headlines, he's willing to shut down the government if he doesn't get funding for the wall. So a couple questions here, Maria. Do you think that a wall is going to help decrease, illegal immigration? Let's just start there.
Absolutely.
We're going to have Joe coming up. He's going to...
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
What is this, a radio show? What is this? We're going to have Joe coming up taking the Conduit for Action weekly quiz. The topic this week is, to answer your question, Joe, it's numbers on Arkansas Medicaid spending. So you better buff up. Better buff up on that real quick in the next like 8 minutes. Yeah. Hang on one second. I was going to give you an update on. Do you guys remember during the Supreme Court justice races here in Arkansas? You had a race between Courtney Goodson, the current justice, and David Sterling. Okay. And pretty interesting stuff. If you remember, there was that Judicial Crisis Network group that wanted to, or that put ads, but then they had a lawsuit filed by the Goodson campaign, and they stopped the ads from running. It was fascinating. But John Moritz, this was about a week ago, headline, on appeal, Little Rock TV station says free speech rights were violated in election ads case. This has to do with them essentially saying, hey, listen, you guys shouldn't have pulled the ads. This was our freedom of speech to air these ads that were paid for. There's nothing. Well, here, listen to this. Quote, by granting Goodson's request for a preliminary injunction, the circuit court silences campaign speech in the critical days before the election, wrote attorney John Toll in the brief. Toll also serves as the counsel for the Arkansas Press Association. I mean, it is a dangerous precedent. And he had a judge, remember that, I think had to recuse himself, but I think that he did that after he issued the stay. There's an interesting op-ed as well from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette on this issue. Privilege of the gravest. When in doubt, side with the First Amendment. I think that's good. I think First Amendment. Oh, and by the way, I know it was said during that time that the First Amendment doesn't give you the right to lie, but it absolutely does. It's called the freedom of speech. Back in a minute.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Absolutely. Walls work. Our doors work. We all lock our doors, our cars. We need a wall, and it would prevent these illegal aliens from easily crossing over. There is no way our agents can control that border right now. I've been along that border. I've been on night watches, watching these illegal aliens with backpacks loaded with drugs coming across, and I was 60 miles north of our border. So absolutely, it's due the American public. 40 years we've been waiting for this, and these politicians know exactly what they're doing. They don't want that security because they are owned, Paul, by these open borders groups who shell out a lot of money for their reelection campaigns. You know, I say they fill their coffers with this blood money, while American children are filling coffins.
Yeah, I was reading a story today about the Koch brothers, matter of fact, and how they had they had a conference call with some of their donors, and they were saying that they might support Democrats if the Democrats will oppose the tariffs that President Trump is on, but also they also reported it. You know, look, we don't want the type of border security. At least that was the Breitbart article I was reading. We want this to continue, you know, because right now, let's just talk about this, Maria. If we have a decrease in illegal immigration, we're going to have wages rise eventually. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I know individuals who owned small companies. You know, mom and pop shops, Paul. This is what we're talking about. And they cannot compete with another company that illegally hires these illegal aliens. And because, look, the standard of living is totally different. We live here. These illegal aliens, for now, are 10 men in an apartment. So, yes, they can make, you know, $2 an hour and survive just fine. And they send their money back home. As we know, the dollar is much stronger in Mexico. So our mom and pop shops, like my parents had, eventually, are going out of business. And there are no jobs that can sustain Americans if this continues.
So the first question was, do you think a border wall is going to stop illegal immigration? You said yes. What about shutting down the government? What do you think? You think it's time to stare down across the aisle and say, hey, listen, you know, this is what I was elected to do, and you guys need to fund it?
Well, I think they're doing a poor job anyway. They're supposed to be having these budgets, 12 different budgets. No, they're throwing everything in one lump together so that we're forced, you know, they're trying to force the American people to accept this, and we have with this omnibus bill and all that's going on. But take a look. You ask these families whose loved ones are 6 feet under, never to see them again, and all the turmoil that they've had to go through, where they're not getting calls. They want to know why this illegal alien who was, you know, 4 or 5, even 10 times deported or spent time in jail and was released and remained in our country to have access to their loved one. Mm-hmm. You ask them, what's it worth to you? I say yes, shut down the government. That is because we've had it. They can't hold us, threaten us any longer as we're watching our country be ruined. I would rather them just go home and have them work on enforcing existing laws. We don't need any new ones where they're creating loopholes, Paul, to be able to get those funding from the open borders groups. And those open border groups, you know, they're owned by, you know, people who are pretty well off, and they're not living where we live.
You mentioned at the beginning of the interview, Maria, that you got started, you and your husband, by trying to fight the sanctuary policies of Houston, Texas. Now, for all of our listeners across the state of Arkansas, that may be a little surprising to us because we kind of look at Texas a little differently. But I do know Houston, the city of Houston, has some strange policies. I remember a story a long time ago about how they made it illegal to feed the homeless, I think, off the top of my head. But so tell us, though, is Houston still a sanctuary city, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. However, because, and this happened in the last few years, because they cooperate with the federal government on other matters, they do not consider themselves a sanctuary city. So, for me, either you enforce
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Yeah, so in order to keep the Chinese coming to Arkadelphia has agreed to change the name of their town to Chinadelphia, just to make them feel at home. That is the fake news of today, but we still named the first hour of our podcast Chinadelphia, so check it out if you missed it. The state treasurer reports that $77.2 million have come into the state coffers because of the state's investments. That would be what we got, I guess, an interest profits, on $3 billion of investments. In other news, Senator Tom Cotton said his goal, aside from the midterms and the positive result that Republicans are seeking from these midterms coming up in November, is second terms for himself and for President Donald Trump. I believe that was on the front page of the Arkansas section in the Democrat Gazette. With all that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is time. That's all right, folks. It's that time again where we go to the Conduit Fraction website and we take their weekly quiz. New numbers are out on Arkansas Medicaid spending in Arkansas. There are two types of Medicaid, of course, traditional Medicaid, Medicaid expansion. Traditional Medicaid is for the truly poor and needy and includes those with disabilities. Children are also included under traditional Medicaid. Medicaid expansion, though, is Obamacare. It's a welfare program. It's for people able to work who mostly don't, ages 19 to 64. Traditional Medicaid is a straight fee-for-service system where actual services performed are paid with taxpayer dollars. For example, a doctor visit, prescriptions, mental health services are used by the patient, and then Medicaid pays the cost after that. Medicaid expansion, though, is where health insurance plans are purchased and owned by the state of Arkansas with taxpayer money, and monthly premiums are paid. The monthly premium, now averaging over $500 a month, is paid to insurance companies regardless of whether anybody goes to the doctor or any health services are rendered. Both programs are 100% paid for with taxpayer money. Under traditional Medicaid, a taxpayer's federal dollars pay 70% of the cost, and a taxpayer's state dollars pay 30%. Under Medicaid expansion, the taxpayer federal dollars will pay, starting in 2020, for 90% of the costs, and the taxpayers of the state will pay 10%. This quiz highlights the new numbers of Medicaid spending in Arkansas, and the source where this data comes from is the Arkansas Department of Human Services. Joe, are you ready?
I guess so.
Now, Joe, before we get started, I do feel like we do have to recognize something a day late, though. Yesterday,
I didn't realize it yesterday either.
Yesterday marks 2 years that you've been here.
Producing this show for 2 years.
It's pretty good. And
time has definitely flown by.
And in that 2 year period, we've added a lot to the show. I mean, not only affiliates, but just in terms of the technical things that have to happen behind there. I mean, sometimes I look in there and you're like the Wizard of Oz, you know.
The man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Look.
Well, what I'm saying is, you know how he was touching all these different buttons,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Spinning wheels.
Yeah. Anyway, it's certainly, I compare it in there many times to the Millennial Falcon because.
Millennial Falcon.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's exactly what this is, the Millennial Falcon.
The Millennium Falcon. I compare it to the Millennium Falcon because it's really difficult sometimes to get all of the newer stuff to integrate with the older analog stuff.
Mm-hmm.
When you do radio, now we've basically added television because we're on cable outlets in north central Arkansas, as well as broadcasting digitally through the air there. And so it's quite the interesting setup here. So anyway, thanks for being here for 2 years.
5 monitors around me.
Yeah, I know. It's like the Bat Cave. It's like every kid's dream, in a way. Are you living the dream?
Okay. Of being Batman? Definitely not.
Well, Little Rock's kind of like Gotham. Anyway, all right, number 1. How much did taxpayers spend in total on Arkansas Medicaid beneficiaries? This is both traditional Medicaid and Medicaid expansion for fiscal year 2018. Was it $2.4 billion, $3.7 billion, or $7.1 billion?
My gut's telling me 7.1.
You're going to go with the higher number there.
Yeah.
Okay. 7.1 billion. Now keep in mind, well, we'll keep going. How about that? I don't want to be accused of cheating or helping you cheat. Question number 2. How much did taxpayers spend on traditional Medicaid for fiscal year 2018? So this is just traditional Medicaid. 3.8 billion, 4.4 billion, or 5.2 billion?
5.2, because 5.2 is roughly 70% of 7.1.
Okay. All right. Question number 3. How much did taxpayers spend in fiscal year 2018 on Medicaid expansion? The Obamacare welfare program called Arkansas Works. 800 million, 1.2 billion, or 1.9 billion?
1.9 because of math.
Okay.
1.9 plus 5.2 equals 7.1.
Okay. All right. So you think you're 3 for 3?
Yeah, I think I'm shooting 100% here.
Okay, all right. And question number 4. Arkansas has a population of approximately 3 million people. How many people are on either traditional or Medicaid expansion? Traditional Medicaid or Medicaid expansion for fiscal year 2018. Is it 450,000, 720,000, or 959,000? Hang on one second, Joe, because I feel like you need just a little help. This is the one that is, I could tell by the look on your face. You're like, well, okay, all right, I'm not so sure about this one. I'm going to have to think it out. This is your think it out music. And it's very kind of, I don't know, it doesn't stress me out at all. What do you think? Going to need an answer here when you hear this sound.
I feel like 959,000 is too much, but I don't think it's wrong. Yeah,
well,
I'm going to go with just under. Well, that's.
What do you think?
Population. Yeah, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to go with about a third of the population.
Wow, a third of the population is on Medicaid. Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
In some
According
form.
to your
in some shape or form.
Wow. All right, question 5. How many enrollees were on the Obamacare Medicaid Expansion Welfare Program called Arkansas Works as of June 30th, 2018? Was it 145,000, 210,000, or 287,000?
As of June 30th?
Yes.
I think it's not. It's definitely not 145. It's definitely not.
Yeah, definitely is.
It's over 200.
You say definitely way past that.
Yeah, it's definitely over 200. I think it's 287.
So much silence.
Yeah, I think it's 287,000.
Going with 287,000. Okay. Question 6. After a net decrease of around 53,000 people, falling from 340,000 enrollees in 2017.
Number 6 gives away the answer. Number
to
5.
287,000 as of June 30th, 2018. Did spending on the Medicaid Expansion Arkansas Works program increase or decrease?
So from it falling.
Okay, so it fell around 53,000 people, falling from 340,000 enrollees to 287.
It would naturally decrease because you're not paying $500 a month for these 53,000 people.
Okay.
So naturally, you'd think it'd decrease.
Mm-hmm. You would think that.
I'm using logic on this one.
You would think
How
that.
dare I use logic?
I'm sure there's a lot of people in the media that would think that too.
How dare I use logic when it comes to Arkansas Works?
I know.
So I went with decrease.
You went with decrease.
Going with what natural tendency would tell me.
Okay. What is the average monthly payment to insurance companies from taxpayers for health insurance premiums under Obamacare Medicaid expansion or Arkansas Works?
Well, I just said it was $500, so it's $578.
All right, so you're going with $578. Your other options were $317 or $412, but okay, if you don't want me to get through all of the multiple
I'm not
choice
going to.
options, that's fine. That's fine. What is the tax rate on health insurance premiums in Arkansas? In other words, how much tax does Arkansas collect on the premiums it pays insurance companies, taxing taxpayer money? I mean, that's essentially what happens here, is there's a tax on taxpayer money on the spending of it. It's
2.5%. I don't know why, but 2.5% was the first thing that rang out in my head.
All right.
I didn't even look at the numbers. That was just the first thing that came out of my head was 2.5.
All right, so you're going with your gut.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's all. The question 9 is you should subscribe to the Conduit Fraction emails if you haven't already. Question 10 is what town do you live? That's just a little metric. We don't share your information or anything like that. All right, so whenever you're ready, Joe, hit the submit button and let's see. Oh, 7 out of 8.
What did I miss?
7 out of 8. You got an 87.5%.
Of course. How dare I use logic when it comes to...
So you missed question number 6, which was after a net decrease of 53,000 people, falling from 340,000 enrollees to 287,000 enrollees. Did spending on the Medicaid Arkansas Works program increase or decrease?
How dare I use logic when it comes to this?
So there's a couple of things here, okay? The reason why spending went up is because Arkansas's share of what it has to pay went up. So the federal government did pay 100%, but we had to pay a little bit more, right? So it went up. But number 2 is, you see question 7 there, the average monthly payment. When this program started, the average monthly payment to an insurance company was, I believe, around $400, okay? And it has slowly increased over time to where it's now almost $600 a person. And so that's how you can lose $53,000 from the program. Now, can you imagine if they hadn't been doing the re-verification processes like they didn't do under the Beebe administration and some under the Hutchinson administration? Then this would have gotten unsustainable very, very quickly. And here's the thing. Even with 287,000 people on the program now, it's still unsustainable. We still don't have the money to pay this in the long term without going to the people and, demagoguing. We don't have money for police or higher education. We don't want to admit that it's because we're spending all this money on a welfare program that we, fundamentally goes against the Republican Party platform principles. But will they admit that, or will they take money from education or take money from roads and get us to raise, say that we've got to raise taxes? That's the game plan here.
I miss one question and I get a B.
Well, that's just the way it goes.
That's
the
where the news goes.
I really always hated that, by the way. I hated the quizzes. Like when I was in college, you
quizzes.
would get the short quizzes, and you're like, man, if you miss one question here,
you basically get an F.
Yeah. Well,
basically.
If it's a one question quiz, yeah, then it can be bad.
Well, if it's 2 questions, then you still get an F.
This is true. But but I guess my point is, that's just the way the news goes.
Yeah,
it's just the way the news goes. So, folks, the telephone number is 870-275-9799. If you want to be a part of the program today, you can do so. You can also sound off over at facebook.com/Conduit News. What do you guys think about the Conduit for Action quiz and those Medicaid numbers? I know you'll see headlines in the mainstream media about saving money for Medicaid. Just know that they're talking about saving money from, it's still an increase, but it's less of an increase than it was planned, so they call it a savings. Yeah. It's kind of like that budgeting process where if you're slated to get a 5% increase and the government steps in and says, no, you're only going to get a 2% increase, the Democrats will say, you're cutting funding for kids. It's like, no, they're still getting the same amount of money they got last year. They're actually getting more. They're just not getting as more as you want. He said that's kind of the other side of this coin. Then you claim a savings. Anyway, the phone number, 870-275-9799. Amy Freeman on Facebook writes, carefully crafted language. Yes, you are right. Carefully crafted language is the name of the game. Skip on Facebook wants Joe to know that he also made an 87.5. Skip, did you miss the same question? Did you have the same intellectual failings as Joe did on question 6? I'm curious. What else do we have? Jackie writes, I don't flinch anymore. I've been conditioned, meaning nothing in government surprises you. That's a really good thing to it's a really good mentality to have. I've often, on that subject of flinching, kind of the other side of that coin is to never think that the government won't do X, Y, and Z. As soon as you think that, there's somebody, in a well-lit room of the Marble Palace that has the idea and moves forward with it. I'm convinced of that. It's like some sort of psychological effect. The second that you, as a citizen, say, well, the government would never do this, somebody somewhere is like, ha, 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 I have an idea. I'll give you an example of this happening. I've told this story before, but back when they were trying to pass Obamacare, which we now know was passed, Jonathan Gruber, right, said that they had to lie to us to get it to happen. They had to lie to the American people, and you'd rather have this law than not. Rather lie to us than tell us the truth, because if you'd have told us the truth, it wouldn't have passed. So back when they were doing that, they were trying to figure out a way to pay for it, and one of the things that they came up with was the sin tax on sunbeds. So if you wanted to tan and you wanted to, have that ultraviolet radiation that could potentially cause cancer, you wanted to do that, well, we're going to tax that because that's making everybody else's health care go up. So I said, well, what are they going to do next? Are they going to tax video games? Video games, you sit on your couch, you eat potato chips or whatever, and you play video games, and that's not a very healthy activity. They're going to start taxing video games. And I said, you know what? They'll never tax video games. That would be too unpopular with the young base that voted for Barack Obama. Guess what? They didn't do it, but they proposed it almost the next week. And I thought, wow, I need to quit thinking up things that the government will never do, because as soon as you do, there's somebody, in a well-lit room and with a nice suit on that says, hey, this is a great idea. The people will love it. We got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio on this Thursday. Tomorrow on the program is Johnny Cash Friday. Want to make sure everybody knows that. You feel free to text 870-275-9799 if you have any requests. Coming up at the bottom of this hour, we'll be talking with financial analyst, forensic accountant, Federal Reserve System scholar, and constitutional advocate, Mr. Alan Myers. Going to talk a little bit about the financial situation in countries around the world. You don't want to miss it. Back in a moment.
If this continues.
So the first question was, do you think a border wall is going to stop illegal immigration? You said yes. What about shutting down the government? What do you think? You think it's time to stare down across the aisle and say, hey, listen, this is what I was elected to do, and you guys need to fund it?
Well, I think they're doing a poor job anyway. They're supposed to be having these budgets, 12 different budgets. No, they're throwing everything in one lump together so that we're forced. They're trying to force the American people to accept this, and we have with this omnibus bill and all that's going on. But take a look. You ask these families whose loved ones are 6 feet under, never to see them again, and all the turmoil that they've had to go through, where they're not getting calls. They want to know why this illegal alien who was 4 or 5, even 10 times deported or spent time in jail and remained.
This is Mother Government. I come to the people of Arkansas with an important announcement. In disloyal circles, some are questioning the scope and size of government and telling the people government programs should not waste the labors of the people under the guise of taking care of them. This is a thought I must correct. People of Arkansas, you should not believe everything you hear unless it comes from a government source. Let me, Mother Government, set the record straight. You know you can trust me. After all, would your own mother lie to you? You should know the brand new, terrific program known as Arkansas Works has nothing to do with the old, bad program known as the Obamacare private option. Arkansas Works is good. People who say otherwise are bad and are seeking to undermine my collective vision for progress. If these groups continue in their criticism, then you should question their party loyalty. Tell them to quit focusing on this single issue. And then, remind them Mother Government says the future of Arkansas depends on this single issue. In my next address, I will discuss the need to prepare your fellow citizens for the next round of revenue gathering that will be needed to continue funding my motherly goals. This message was brought to you by our partner, Aristocrats, serving Arkansas. Thank you for listening, and remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, Arkansas, welcome back. Thanks for listening. Good morning to you. I hope you guys have a prosperous day, and I really appreciate you starting the beginning of your day with us here at Conduit News, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Folks, a couple of, what did this happen back in 2000, from 2014 to 2017, the city of Fort Smith, and there's a lawsuit on this, the city of Fort Smith was using sanitation department recycling trucks to collect recyclable materials that residents took the time to set out separately from their trash cans. Okay. The city then took the recyclables directly to a landfill without informing the residents the material was not being recycled. Oh, so you felt good about yourself, but the city let you down. You're trying to save the planet, save the environment. What's interesting, up in my neck of the woods here in northeast Arkansas, we just switched from the blue, the blue bags to actual blue bins. And guess what? Me and my household are now recycling less with the blue bins because you can't recycle glass. You can't because you just put everything directly in the bins. And it makes you got to have this now whole. I guess we're going to adapt or something. But you got to have this whole separating situation. It's kind of wild. But I mean, can you imagine if they're just not going to recycle it? So there's a lawsuit now in the city of Fort Smith who's being sued for this. They lost a bid for immunity. They claimed we shouldn't be allowed to we shouldn't be allowed to be sued. We're the city of Fort Smith. Well, the court is saying that they cannot claim immunity in its defense of a lawsuit filed by a resident alleging that Fort Smith wrongly collected fees to recycle material that ended up in the landfill. The court can find nothing in the jurisprudence or legislative history, according to David Hughes with the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, that would allow a defense of statutory or constitutional sovereign immunity under the facts of this case. Interesting. So Tabor made the ruling in response to a motion by attorneys for Jennifer Marriott, who filed suit against the city last year claiming illegal exaction and unjust enrichment. The unjust enrichment issue is being treated as a class action because the lawsuit alleges that the city used sanitation department recycling trucks to collect recyclable materials that residents set out separately from their trash cans from 2014 to 2017. The city then took them directly to the landfill without informing the residents. Attorneys for Marriott have said the city spent as much as $1 million to maintain the subterfuge by using recycling trucks when regular trash collection trucks could have been used. So essentially, you're taking taxpayer dollars for one thing, and you're not living up to your end of the bargain. You're failing the taxpayers. You're taking their money for recycling, but then not recycling. You're just using a landfill. But you're taking the tax dollars to maintain the recycling trucks. It's a fascinating case. It's one of those. It's an inside baseball case. You might even call it a petty case. But we need to be petty with our elected officials, don't we? We need to make sure they toe the line, right? I think it's a pretty good story. Folks, so we're going to be right back with Mr. Alan Myers. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment.
to have access to their loved ones. You ask them, what's it worth to you? I say yes, shut down the government. That is because we've had it. They can't hold us, threaten us any longer as we're watching our country be ruined. I would rather them just go home and have them work on enforcing existing laws. We don't need any new ones where they're creating loopholes, Paul, to be able to get those funding from the open borders groups. And those open border groups, they're owned by people who are pretty well off, and they're not living where we live.
You mentioned at the beginning of the interview, Maria, that you got started, you and your husband, by trying to fight the sanctuary policies of Houston, Texas. Now, for all of our listeners across the state of Arkansas, that may be a little surprising to us because we kind of look at Texas a little differently. But I do know Houston, the city of Houston, has some strange policies. I remember a story a long time ago about how they made it illegal to feed the homeless, I think, off the top of my head. But so tell us, though, is Houston still a sanctuary city, in your opinion?
In my opinion, yes. However, because, and this happened in the last few years, because they cooperate with the federal government on other matters, they do not consider themselves a sanctuary city. So, for me, either you enforce and collaborate with the federal government on every aspect, or you don't. And they can't, again, pick and choose which laws that they want to enforce and abide by. And unfortunately, that these elected officials have immunity when it comes to being held accountable should there be a casualty because of their policies. That's very unfortunate, but I think that, and it's been tried and trying to go after these individuals, and there's a discretionary function, qualified immunity. And I think that what these sanctuary city mayors and governors are doing, especially with the sanctuary city policies, I feel that their qualified immunity should not apply. So I think that they should be held accountable and prosecuted. There are very stiff laws in the code.
Yeah, and that may be what President Trump and the executive branch have to do before it's all said and done. And it's reminiscent of when President Reagan had a standoff with the air traffic controllers who went on strike, and eventually he just had to say, okay, you're gone, I'll bring in the military and they'll do your job. And, you just got fired. And there are people that, I've talked to people that are my age whose parents were, they were air traffic controllers and then they lost their job. That it may be a similar situation, but even higher stakes when Donald Trump eventually is going to have to deal with cities here who are just blatantly ignoring and enabling these preventable deaths that the
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. I want to introduce you to a financial analyst. His name is Mr. Alan Myers. Alan, welcome to Conduit News Radio this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
It says here you are a forensic accountant, a Federal Reserve System scholar, a constitutional advocate. How do you become something like that?
I am a forensic accountant, and that is just through practice. I would call myself a student of the financial or banking system of this country, and once again, that comes from just a lot of serious study. I'm an advocate of the Constitution. I have a friend who is a constitutional scholar. And with all its warts and blemishes, it's a fantastic document, and it created the potential for a fantastic country.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is, and that's one of the things that really stood out to me. Being a constitutional advocate, it's very strong. But I wanted to have you on because I wanted to talk about this article that I have here in front of me. We don't talk a lot about Brexit on the program, but there is an article that was recent, came out over at Bloomberg, and it talked about how London traders are frogs in a boiling Brexit pot. What does that mean?
I've read the article. I've studied it. approximately somewhere in 2019, England may leave the EU, European Union, which has been called Brexit, or Britain exit. And the upshot is that the largest amount of what is called euro-denominated derivative clearing is done in London by the London Clearing House. Clearing derivatives is basically similar to being an escrow company dealing with buyers and sellers of real estate. But the London Clearing House deals with the buyers and sellers of euro-denominated derivatives. And we can get into what a derivative is in a moment. What's on the table is that if England leaves the EU is going to want all that business back into a country that is controlled by the EU. It's a huge amount of activity. London has the absolute lion's share of it, and the threat is that London could lose tens of thousands of jobs. What is not really talked about is, or just briefly in the article, is that the London Clearing House, also known as LCH, has its own office in Paris, which means it can move the operation to Paris and still be within the confines of the EU. To me, the article, it's not so much what the article says, it's what the article doesn't say that really intrigues me.
Well, and so, what are we getting at here in terms of, I know the people of the UK want Brexit. As far as a political movement, it certainly has been seen as maybe the counterpart to the anti-establishment motivations of Americans. And a lot of people are wondering why Brexit hasn't happened yet. There's all this speculation that it hasn't happened fast enough and that sort of thing. But I do know one thing. The people of the UK, seems like they don't like sending their money to the European Union and then having it sent back to them with strings attached. But this is a different situation here. You're saying that this is just going to be a financial consequence of leaving the European Union.
I believe that's somewhat the threat, and they'll bring it down to the personal level, which is you're going to lose tens of thousands, if not more, jobs. What the article doesn't talk about, which to me is so much more important, is, just to put it in a nutshell, the article talks about Deutsche Bank. Deutsche Bank is the largest bank in Germany, one of the largest banks in the world, and that Deutsche Bank would be getting a lot of this business. But they don't really go into the financial condition of Deutsche Bank and what it's doing and how tentative it is as a financial institution. They also don't talk about derivatives. It's treated as if it's just something average, normal, but it's not. Nobody said it better than Warren Buffett. He said derivatives are financial weapons of mass destruction, carrying dangers that, while now latent, are potentially lethal. Derivatives are just gambling bets.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a straight-up investment in a stock or a bond. It's a bet on what will happen to the price of a stock, a bond, or even an index. This is pure gambling.
It is interesting.
Even more,
I would wonder if leaving Brexit, or I'm sorry, leaving the European Union, if Brexit actually is allowed to happen, do these derivatives now get exposed? Do the people of Europe or the United Kingdom, do they see some of these bad bets, or they see the consequences of some of these bad bets? Is that really why they're dragging their feet on leaving? Is because they don't really want to see, they don't want the people to see what's behind the curtain?
That could be possible. The other is that derivatives, and specifically what's called a credit default swap, this was at the heart of the problem that we had leading into 2008.
Mm-hmm.
These are, again, this is not a typical investment, a stock or a bond. This is pure gambling. And what's even more frightening is the absolute sheer number. Deutsche Bank, one report I read, has an exposure to derivatives. Again, this is a report I read. $157 trillion of credit default swaps on its books. These are bets. You've got buyers and sellers, and what happens when something goes wrong, and the buyer wants to collect on its derivative bet, and the seller can't pay off? Well, we saw what happened in 2008. That's what led to the financial meltdown.
Wow.
Because it would be like a casino owner. If you're a casino owner and some big gambler came in and you know that the bet this person was placing, given the odds, if the gambler won, you couldn't pay off.
Mm-hmm.
You were not going to let that bet go down. Well, in the derivatives market, it can take months or years before that gambling moment comes to an end. And in the meantime, the derivative seller is bringing in tons and tons of money to themselves. So they feel really good. But they can't eventually make the payoff to all the buyers.
I'm really glad that you're talking about this, because I had no idea. I had no idea. What you're essentially suggesting is that Europe in general may be facing a financial crisis that is severely the potential of is going underreported virtually everywhere. There's a few drips here and there, but for the most part, a lot of people don't know about this.
Exactly. I did a recent study. I just took some facts that I could find on the internet, and they go back to 2016, but they're relatively current or relevant. And I summarized the populations of all the 28 countries in the EU, that includes the UK. I looked at their GDP in US dollars. I looked at their debt percentage to the GDP. And what the calculation shows is that the EU has, round numbers, 511 million people. The U.S. has 323 million people. The collected debt, and this is all in U.S. dollars, the collected debt for the EU is over $14 trillion. And at that time, the U.S. debt was in the $19 trillion range. Which, to your point, what's really not being talked about is the sheer specifics of the numbers. Trillion, to me, has become just a word. People throw it around. They don't process the magnitude, the astronomical magnitude of this number, and I can make it very simple. 1 trillion seconds. You snap your finger, you've gone through 1 second. If you could snap your finger 1 trillion times, 1 a second, you'd be snapping your finger for 31,709 years. That's 1 trillion.
Wow.
The debt load on the U.S. is now over 21 trillion. It is unpayable. The debt load in 2016, give or take, for all the EU was 14 trillion. These debts are unpayable.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when these systems will go down.
Mm-hmm.
And
what
Deutsche Bank.
I'm curious. We talk about debt. We used to talk about it in conservative circles. We would talk about the United States debt all the time. $20 trillion. Now it's 20 plus. Is there a way to grow yourself out and pay that off? Is that possible?
There is no, given the current monetary system that we have, which is the short answer is no. Given the current monetary system, this current monetary system creates this situation. Therefore, you can't fix it. The key thing that has to be changed in our monetary system is one thing, and it's relatively simple. And that is to take from the banks the ability, the sole power to create money, and return that power to the benefit of the people. To that end, though it may sound a little crazy or wacky, back in June of this year, Switzerland had a national referendum. And they can get national referendums. People can start it. It takes a couple years to go through the process. And that's what happened. It was called the Sovereign Monetary Initiative. the key element of that initiative, that referendum, was to do exactly what I said, which is to take from the banks the ability to create money and return it to the people. When you do that, you can fix this problem. Until then, this problem is just going to continue to grow and grow until the financial system blows, which it did in 2008. And we know what that was like. But the debt load is even greater than back then.
You mentioned monetary policy, and I want to talk about that. Folks, we're talking with Alan Myers, financial analyst, constitutional advocate. He's also a student of the Federal Reserve, knows a lot about that. I've got an article here in front of me. I'm going to put it back up for our audience. This is an old piece from February of 2017 from Bloomberg. The headline, Trump vows level playing field for U.S., Japan, China currency. What is that about? Does that have anything to do with possibly, being a significant change in our monetary policy, having a level playing field? I mean, not just with Japan and China and the United States, but maybe all countries. Is that maybe what the president is going for when he's trying to do these tariffs and these trade deals?
With the trade deals, it's my understanding that our goods up until now have been, to possibly use the word incorrectly, have been more tariffed going out than we have tariffed other people's goods coming in. This, to me, all of these problems are very significant, and depending on what industry you are in the U.S., this could really hurt you, this could really benefit you, so I'm not making light of it. But none of this is ever going to fix the problems that we're looking at, which is currently in the U.S. $21 trillion of unpayable debt. You can't. We're lucky. The only reason this debt can be serviced right now, meaning you can make the interest payments, is because the interest rate's so low. If the interest rates went up to a more normal 4, 5, 6%, which used to be the standard for treasuries, the debt would be unpaid. You couldn't even service the debt.
So
the government today is.
I guess if that's true, okay, if it's, and I know about the historic interest rates, if they return to historic norms, I mean, it's bad. And then, of course, we have this non-discretionary spending that is, 75% of our money. We have to reform that, but even that, is an uphill battle. If we've got all of this debt we can't pay off, and the European Union has all of this debt and these derivatives in that crisis, then what happens? I mean, at some point, if your whole system and your monetary policy where you can just print money and then tell everybody else they have to have it if their currency is going to be worth something, at what point what do you do? Do you start over? I mean, if it's not based on sound fundamental economic policies, but it's just based on this fiat stuff, I mean, what's the end game here, Alan?
That's a multi-headed question there. The end game is one of two things. One, we fix it before it really breaks, or you hang on for dear life after it breaks. The last time the system really broke was what led us into the Great Depression. Milton Friedman, Nobel Prize-winning economist, clearly stated that the Fed being the Federal Reserve System, the Fed definitely caused the Great Depression. Its policies led to a reduction of money in the money supply between 29 and 33, about 1/3. Well, if you take 1/3 of the blood out of a human, they're going to die. You take 1/3 out of the, in essence, the monetary blood out of the system, you take the money out, the system's going to fail. And the Fed did that. Bernanke even acknowledged that in a speech in the early 2000s, and he apologized for it. But you can't fit, no matter what policies are implemented, you cannot fix this broken system. The only thing that can fix this system is to take from the bank, and if you ever want to have this long chat, I can have it. You have to take the power and the benefit of money creation from banks and return it to the benefit of the people.
Yeah.
When that's done, you can fix this system. If you look at what happened, during and after the Great Depression, how much more powerful did our federal government get? And how much weaker did the state governments get?
Yes, absolutely.
And everybody was looking to the federal, and I understand it, and I sympathize and empathize with it. The jobs were gone. You lost your house, your farm, your ranch, everything. You're hoping to have a meal, and this is all due to the policies of the Fed at the time. Yet they're still in power.
Let me ask you this. Last question, because I know we got to wrap this up. I know you have to go, but where's China in all of this? And what role do they have to play in this very, very convoluted economic situation?
China is obviously a very big player in the world economy. It holds, a good portion of our debt. It's been accused of many crimes against our intellectual property. Mm-hmm. But China's got its own big problem. It's got a massive pollution problem. But more importantly, people will tout a country's GDP and how high and how consistently high the GDP of China has been. But there's one little fact that you probably will never or very seldom ever hear anybody talk about, but economists know about this. And it's called the capital utilization rate. The capital utilization rate is, of all the capital you created with your GDP, how much of it are you using? Or is it just sitting idle? Well, China actually has a relatively low capital utilization rate, which meant it's pumped its GDP up with all kinds of buildings, manufacturing. Those assets lay idle. They're not being used. And there's a huge debt load that went along with all that GDP, which, you can look at the EU countries, you can look at our country. We have a very high GDP, but this GDP came from borrowing. It didn't come from, it wouldn't be that high without all this borrowing. And ultimately, when the debt load is too much to service or the debt load becomes unpayable, the system's going to crash. And you don't have to go too far to see what happens when a monetary system crashes. Yeah. You can go back in time to our own Great Depression. You can take a look at what's going on in Venezuela right now. It's terrible.
Yeah, so there'll be a vacuum created, and there's going to be some other system was going to, if this were happening, was going to replace. There's going to be somebody going to want to grab power in that kind of situation. So very interesting.
And it won't be for the benefit of the people.
No, of course not. No, especially not if you're talking about, if China has a big role to play in their economy, and if they've got problems just like everybody else has problems. It seems like if everybody has monetary problems, though, they may be looking for, who knows, maybe military excuses to ignore their monetary problems, and that's very concerning as well. Alan Myers, I'll give you the last word, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on your program. I really appreciate it. You definitely touched on it. Basically, every country in the world, definitely every major country in the world, has significant unpayable debt. This all leads to the fact that we all have relatively similar monetary systems, and who creates the money? You make the one change, and you return the benefit of money creation to people. Again, this be a topic for another conversation. You do that one change, and you return that huge power to the benefit and control of the people. We get out of this situation. We can right this wrong. If we don't do that, and if you check out the Sovereign Monetary Initiative, see what they try to do. this can be done in this country. We just have to demand it, and we have to demand it constantly.
Alan Myers, financial analyst and constitutional advocate. Alan, is there a place people can go if they want to find out more about you?
I've just been getting into this, and I've got a website in progress. What I would say is if people have questions for me, comments, and if you don't mind, route them through you. You can get them to me, and I will respond.
Yes.
And as soon as I've got a website up where I can put all my writings, I will let you know.
Sounds good. And we're going to make a copy of this YouTube video, and we'll send that to you. Just a small, just the clip of it, and you can get that on your social media as well. So, Alan, I really appreciate it, sir. I hope you have a great day. If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. Remembrance Project is all about. And Maria, I'll give you the last word.
Okay, and there are many other crimes too, Paul. Really quick, for instance, over 600,000 crimes were committed against Texans alone. So there's many other crimes that this is attached to. But I want to thank you and keep up the good work, Paul. Continue spreading the word. And I ask for your listeners to go to our website, theremembranceproject.org, sign up for our emails. And if you can afford anything, just please make a donation. We're going to come create more Stone Life quilt banners and send those out to all over the United States. So we need help.
Maria Espinoza, I appreciate it so much. It's great to meet you. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Absolutely, Paul. God bless you.
All righty.
Keep praying for our president and our country.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Maria Espinoza, everybody, the director of the Remembrance Project. Go there now, theremembranceproject.org.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The one thing, welcome back to the program. We had a great show today. We're wrapping things up. We're going to be back here tomorrow for Johnny Cash Friday. Really appreciate everybody out there listening. Appreciate Mr. Alan Myers coming on. The one thing I forgot to ask him was about President Donald Trump and potentially the different policies that he has for the Federal Reserve versus other presidents. And the reason I say that is I'm just curious, as anti-status quo as President Donald Trump is on so many other fronts, is he also that way when it comes to his approach about monetary policy, the Federal Reserve, and what I call thermostat economics, the belief that with the Federal Reserve you can actually, tweak economic conditions in such a way that it's like setting, your thermostat to 71 versus 72 versus 70. You know what I'm saying? And I think history demonstrates that, our economic overlords, they certainly, they think they can do it, but they really don't. They end up having terrible consequences elsewhere, or it's all intentional. And that's the case. Maybe thermostat economics is a reality and not just an illusion or a goal. Folks, thank you so much for being with us. We'll continue to talk about China and what Arkansas's role will be in standing with the communist Chinese government or not. Let's focus on the not, right? Let's cancel China. Let's not come up with a new program called China Works, shall we?